Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tom Miller of Hamburg Commercial Bank, and I feel both lucky and honored to host this discussion. Creating the best match between fiber entrepreneurs and investors, that's what we have on our agenda for today. And on the panel, we have Hilary Moon of Nokia CX. Hello, Hilary. Marco Grifan of ING. Michael Sandberg of DX Fibre, Richard Topin of Cetix, Yves Blondel of T-Regs, Paul Serra of Outvise, and Simon Holden, City Fibre. Great to have you all here. And dear listeners, great that you joined this discussion. This is really about you. So we want to understand your background a bit better to help us focus this discussion. And for this purpose, we have launched the first technical challenge here in this discussion, the Slido poll. So if we may ask everybody who joined us here to answer the first poll, which the producer Josh was kind enough to just bring on screen. So what's your background? Are you more from the operator side? Are you more from the investor side or more from the investing side? And this will help us focus the discussion. And while we wait for your answers to come in, let me also point out that we will ask questions through Slido, or I should better say you have the opportunity to ask questions to our experts. And at approximately 1 hour into this event, we're going to check in on those. And when you hand in a question, comment, or idea, again, we kindly ask you to give us your name and company background so that we understand where you are coming from. Now, let me just double check the answers to the Slido poll. We have, we have 42% investors, and then operators and technology providers, and others. So it's a fairly heterogeneous spectrum. So with a slight overweight of investors. Thank you very much. Let's keep that in mind when we go into our discussion. Now, on this panel, we examine 3 areas. First, we ask what works well and what are the current challenges. It's like the take on the current situation. Second, we ask, what do you expect from the other parties here? And what kind of support will help you? And then, dear listeners, it's time for you. Again, we'll put your inputs into the discussion and your questions to the experts. And then in our final round, we ask, what can we do together as entrepreneurs, as investors, to become even better in our respective fields? All right, let's get started. Hilary, will you give our listeners a bit of background on you and tell us your take on the current situation, please?
Thanks so much, Tom. So I'm Hilary Mine. I run strategy and technology for Nokia's global sales and marketing organization, which we call CX for customer experience. I'm also president of Digital Europe, which is a Brussels-based policy group that drives digital policy, and we've particularly been instrumental in pushing for EU digitalization funds, which are quite relevant for this space. I fell into this industry in 1990 because I fell in love with what fiber optics was capable of. So I'm sad and sorry to admit that it's been about 30 years that I've been looking at fiber networks and looking at how to get them rolled out, which is not trivial. And Nokia, as many of you know, just for background, is a company that offers wireline and wireless mobile and submarine cable networks to a wide range of customers worldwide, aligned with various business models. And we've been rolling out fiber networks again for close to 30 years. Our technologies have been sort of first in the world to support sliced networks, which is really important. So when you think about some of the challenges and opportunities that that people who are rolling out fiber networks have today, it's critical that they be efficient at wholesale and network sharing. And so slicing and capabilities like that are incredibly important. And I have to say, in the 3 decades that I've been in this space, we are going to talk about challenges, but I have never seen a better time for people to roll fiber out. Investors are looking for places to put money that are providing sort of predictable returns. Fiber has now become, it's taken a long time, but we've got the economics in a better place. And the demand in a post sort of, I would say, a permanent pandemic world has become much more predictable as well. So for many of you who have kids that have been studying at home or whatever, we've seen a huge uptake in the demand for wired networks again, right? And we expect that to continue. So the business case potential is much better, and it's been proven in ways that it hasn't before. It doesn't mean you don't have still significant challenges with business cases, significant challenges with regulatory environments. The first thing you learn when you start rolling fiber networks is the problem of getting permits. So one of the things we've been talking to the EU policymakers about is how can we in Europe try to get around that to make it easier for people who are doing rollouts? Because it doesn't matter if you get money, if you can't roll it out, you're sitting on nothing. So I think there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of learnings from the past 30 years. But I am really, truly encouraged by the acceleration we're seeing in the market, by this acceleration in build-outs, and by the financial success that so many operators are having now in this space. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Hillary. That sounds pretty positive. Mikael, let's continue with you. Would you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us your view of the fiber industry? Is it also that positive?
Thank you very much. I'm Michael Sandberg. I'm the executive chairman of VX Fibre. And like Hillary, I've been in this business for 30 years, 2 master theses on fibre in the local loop in 89 and 91. But unlike Hillary, I look much older. I'd say that I should be in the entrepreneurial category. This is my 3rd venture, in fact, in fibre. Previous 2 ones have been in Sweden only. And they were very successful, but we then ventured into the rest of the world in 2014. And 2014, we started VX Fibre, building on the learnings we'd made from Sweden. We had some fundamental learnings from the Swedish market that really was stimulated by the central government providing funds to municipalities. And those funds were used to build city networks. And the municipalities didn't quite know what to do with those assets. All of a sudden, they owned fiber, but couldn't exploit it. And the sector of fiber operator emerged, basically bringing competence and scale to these small fiber networks. So from an early age, I started working with municipalities and saw them as a driving force in fiber rollout. So I would say one of the early learning points was the importance of government incentives into the fiber market, particularly in the rural areas. And also then we understood the importance of working with the public sector. So another learning point was private and public coming together and cooperating, hugely important. And that is one of the reasons we overcame the issues of permitting, for example. Working with the local authorities, we get permits over a sitting table, whereas others can take a year or 2 to get the same permits. We understand where they're coming from. We're enhancing the objectives of the local community. And we came to understand also how important it was to create scale. And scale is vastly important, not when it comes to building and owning fiber. Actually, small network can be quite profitable, but to manage those networks and to provide services over the network is hugely driven by scale. And we saw that in Sweden, the municipality, they struggled to attract the service providers because they had different interfaces, technical, operational, and financial economic interfaces. And bringing those together, bringing one homogeneous network. In Sweden, we managed 118 different networks through one interface. And that allowed service providers to bring scale to that. So understanding the, we call it ecosystem of the fiber world, how that works. That is something we brought with us to VX Fibre. VX Fibre today, we operate from South Africa in the south to Sweden, UK in the north, Holland, so Belgium, Germany, Austria, and a few other places.
Right, Mikael, thank you. Thank you very much. That's quite an impressive lineup. And Richard, let's continue with you. Let us know your association with the fiber business and how you see it. Sorry, you're on mute, Richard. You have to unmute.
I am. Okay. Good morning, and thank you, Tom, and thank you, everybody. I'm very happy to speak with you and to share also my telecom experience. You'll see, just to say CTX in a few words, I set it in year 2000, and we are a company of consulting and engineering firm with operation in more now than 12 countries. And if I can take the next one, if you see what my colleagues, I've been for 30 years. I was in 80s, involved in the first fiber optics. And maybe you don't know, but at that time you say, well, it's kind of glass, and glass, you can bend it. And also it's transparent on many kilometers, on many miles. It was incredible. And how long it will remain? Now we know that it will remain for many, many years. Let's say also that I'm also chairman of the Cercle Credo, a French organization which gathering 100 experts from French companies, fiber optics experts. And I just want to say about why we are here. And by the way, what is FTTH network? And the first thing is that FTTH is booming. Everybody wants to be connected everywhere, anyhow. And thanks to the pandemics, we get the remote working, and we want to be connected even in very, very rural areas. That's the story. And we can say that there are more 1,000 projects in Europe. As say my colleagues, a company is building and operating FTTH networks, and the CapEx is financed by capital, debt, and revenue. And maybe we can have just a stop of the, I have not a link, just the picture displayed here, when you say 3 layers. A layer of passive infrastructures, tranche, ducts, fiber, which will live for 20 years, 25 years. A layer of active networks. You have box with electronics and software, and very skilled. And then you have the service, the contents, the apps where the people make money with. And so to get revenue, you need customers, and you need happy customers who pay for service. Customer will be paying for long time, long range. And so the FTTH networks will be operated for 20 years, 50, 20, 30 years, we don't know, more and more. Remember that the copper lines, they have been operated for more than 100 years. And the telco will be providing service to any customer. And so the telco has to adapt, to modify, to change, to repair the FTTH network. And so, in my mind, a stakeholder must identify this point and assess the investment needed before any action, whether it's investment, whether it's lending. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Richard. Great introduction. Paul, will you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your opinion on where we stand in fiber? Is it really that good?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael. So, yeah, I'm Paul Cerdà. I'm co-founder of Outbuys. I'm ex-management consultant from Oliver Wyman. I've been almost 20 years in the industry and mostly working in the German market. 5 years ago, we set up Outbuys. Outbuys is a highly specialized marketplace for independent consultants, for independent experts in telecom. We have now more than 30,000 of these experts, and we work for main providers in the EMEA region. So mostly in Germany, which is 40% of the market, and then equally distributed UK, Spain, and Middle East and Africa. Our main clients are clients such as private equities like Equite or like Antin, and telco and first tier and second tier telco providers. So I mean, coming out to the challenges, right? I mean, we think that the main asset of a telco operator, of an FTTH operator, is not the operator itself, but is the people who is behind that. So the teams, the human asset, right? And and basically entrepreneurs have to form dream teams of professionals. And there is where I think is the first challenge in the industry, finding good professionals. As of now, there is a lot of demand, and it's quite scarce to find that talent. So what I mean, marketplaces for us and flexible working, such as independent professionals, is an option for entrepreneurs to scale up their businesses. So that's on one side. I mean, basically, FTTH has to build on 3 HR pillars. One is the technology, which are engineers and IT. The other one is operation, and the last one is commercial. And out of these 3, I think one of the challenges is the third one, the commercial, because sometimes we become a bit too techy, and we forget that we have to sell the infrastructure, right? We've been very active on that, setting up commercial teams. And building that is not obvious because you have to be very granular. You have to tackle multiple municipalities at the same time. And the go-to-market, normally the big telcos are not thinking in that sense. So for us, these are the 2 big challenges of the industry from our point of view.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Paul. Eve, let's continue with you. After introducing yourself, please give us your perspective here.
Thank you, Tom, and hello, everyone. I'm Yves Blondel. I run a specialist consultancy providing expertise on telecom regulation. The name of the company is T-Regs. We started specifically with fiber networks 26 years ago by obtaining the first licenses and rights of way for metropolitan fiber networks, building fiber connections to banks and insurance companies and media companies, etc., and other corporate customers. And then dealing with backbone networks connecting the major cities in Europe. And basically we're still at it today. So fiber is really an important part of our consulting business in telecom regulation. We deal with all the aspects of rolling out and running FTTH and FTTO networks. So FTTH for home and FTTO for office, ranging from obtaining the necessary authorizations, day-to-day interactions with the regulatory authorities, and in some cases with competition authorities. And we have a strong focus on the wholesale access obligations that can be placed by telecom regulators on some or in some cases all fiber network operators. So I think we have a good understanding of what triggers regulation, what the type of that regulation might be, and how it affects the network operators and de facto affects the business case and the return for the investors. A major theme today in telecom regulation all over Europe is co-investment, because this has been included in the European Electronic Communications Code, which is the key piece of EU level regulation. And so we see now that the traditional operators, but it's the operators with significant market powers, are planning to enter into agreements with other operators, challengers, new ones. And the terms of that cooperation is a potential trigger for regulatory action, including deregulation of the historic telecom operators, those with significant market power. So there's a lot of complexity and action surrounding that, especially in Italy, whereas the first case is really on the regulatory agenda and being developed. I also have financing and operational experience because I was part of the team of 3 founders of Eurofiber, an FTTO operator and also backbone and backhaul operator. And I helped raise the finance for that 42.5 million in 1999. And I would have said a few years ago, 1999 were really the boom times in fiber. It was relatively easy to raise capital, but somehow I get the impression that we're in the boom times again in 2021 and probably for a few years to come. So I think there's also an optimistic message there that things are going quite well with the fiber business. And just the last point of my introduction is that just recently I was the main author of the FTTH Council Europe guide on business models, fiber business models. And that guide focuses specifically on the reward to private investors, being the shareholders and also the lenders such as banks, etc. So that's also something interesting for the audience to check out. Now, on the key challenges, I think that we should congratulate the new and the challenger operators for having taken on risks already in the past few years and really building out FTTH at a fast pace and leasing those networks out also at a wholesale level. So the new operators are eager wholesalers to any kind of taker of wholesale access. And in some cases, they're also retailers, but some of them are retailers by necessity. So the difference between a wholesale-only business model and a retail business model or a combined business model is also, I think, a point of interest. And I think it's good for market dynamics that there's a lot of focus on wholesaling in the world as we know it today. So congratulations to those new and challenger operators. What we see is that the incumbents, the traditional operators, have in some cases been a bit slower with fiber, and that they've been seeking regulatory concessions and deregulation. And I think overall we can observe that they are lagging behind in a number of important countries. Think of Germany, think of the UK. So the incumbents are lagging behind the challengers, perhaps because they were waiting for regulatory changes that were not so obvious for regulators to deliver. And that's a theme I can talk to.
Great stuff, Yves. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's going to be also a topic for the next round, and I can see you're really deeply into that kind of area. That's great to see. Thank you very much. And wow, we heard so many good things here. Marco, tell the audience a little bit about your role in the fiber universe and how you see the current head and tailwinds here.
Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, my name is Marco Griefan. I'm working in ING's telecommunications sector team, and which mainly focuses on advising clients investing into fiber networks, but also invests itself from a debt perspective into fiber networks. In my role, I had the pleasure to look at various fiber business models, be it B2B, B2B wholesale, or B2C business models. And in that sense, I've also seen various investment cases from a competitive landscape perspective, marketing approaches, construction approaches, and rollout capabilities. And I think at this point in time, I would just mirror the feedback that Yves and Pau have given already on the fiber market in general. I think it is at this point in time, from an operator perspective, very good to attract liquidity in debt markets. And I think the COVID pandemic even increased the attractiveness of this segment, becoming a core infrastructure or being seen as a core infrastructure class. Okay, that's the good news. The challenging part of it, I would say, is that we've at this point in time we see business plans or debt investors rely a lot on due diligence providers, and we see that business plans are presented to us that show every fiber startup actually moving towards becoming a national champion. And I think that's going to be the challenge. And this also puts a lot of pressure on due diligence providers to manage expectations of their clients, as well as on debt investors, as well as equity investors. I would expect to ask the right questions in due diligence process and be selective when it comes to management, because as Pau pointed out, people are quite a key element to the fiber business, not only from an operational but also from a construction perspective. And this is what I would see as the key challenges from an investor community perspective.
Good point. Thank you very much for that. And Simon, you have the last word in our first round. Please let us know who you are and how you perceive current challenges and opportunities.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Holden. I'm the Group COO at CityFibre. This is year 3 for me at CityFibre. Before that, I was a banker for 30 years, and I was at Goldman Sachs for 20 of those and ran the telecom business there. So I've kind of sat on a couple of sides of different fences. CityFibre is UK focused. We are now operating in 60 cities. We are across a 1 million homes passed footprint today, on a journey to covering 8 million, which is about 30% of the UK. We have just completed a round of capital raising. We raised just over £1 billion and that capitalizes the business kind of enterprise value of about $5 billion. So, we're kind of through that startup phase, but we're in the middle of that scaling phase in, a substantial market in Europe. I would say the things that are going well are, the build. You can build this. And actually, going through, recent rounds of diligence, we thought there would be a lot of discussion on that. And actually, there was relatively little. I think the markets prove that they can build it. And I think back to a point that Michael made, we're also demonstrating we can get scale economics over that size of platform, and that's really key. And I think the other thing that's really good is the demand is there. Customers are thrilled to get fiber having sat on copper networks, and our NPS scores on installation are off the charts, 70s or 80s, really fantastic. So that's all great. I think the challenges are really about the medium and long term then for us. One is regulation. I think that regulation frameworks and the ability of incumbents to kind of work their way through those and be painful, is certainly clear in a UK context. We've just had the incumbent here, propose to drop their prices and to put in, a sort of slight loyalty scheme that Ofcom is now working through. So we'll see where that comes out. But, there's plenty of road left, for regulatory challenges. I think on the demand side, we've been through a pandemic. I think Hillary made the point that people want these networks more and more. But I have to tell you, in the UK at least, people's networks have worked okay in the pandemic. Okay, not reliable, they keep dropping out, but people aren't unhappy with the service that they've got. But fiber is so much better and so much more reliable. We've got to do work to create that demand side. And then I think the last thing, and this may be a Brexit comment as well, we are going to see some pressure on the supply chain as there is so much capital chasing build development at the moment. And I think that's something that as an industry we can work on, but there's no doubt that pressure is coming.
Thank you very much. It sounds really like a lot of optimism. We have almost enthusiasm here in this group, and it sounds like the challenges, on the other hand, are more like bottlenecks. Limited talent, limited municipalities who cannot go ahead as planned, certainly not limited capital. Let's focus again on this relationship between entrepreneurs and investors. And let's introduce that second round with another poll. Let me ask Josh, our producer, if we can display our second poll here and see if the audience really agrees with what has been said here. Yes, thank you very much. So we are running a second poll to the audience, asking what are the most common challenges in the entrepreneur-investor relationship, right? So we have costs, for example, risk sharing, information asymmetry. Let's see what everybody thinks is the key challenge here. And while we wait for the results to come in, let me just explain what the second round is going to be about, because now we talk about a relationship. And in a relationship, obviously, it's kind of helpful to understand the expectation of the other side. We had Marco already explain some of the expectations from the investor side, but depending on which side you're on, you may have different expectations from your partner. How could your partner really support you in your next fiber endeavor? This is going to be the topic of our next round, and I'm going to check on the poll. Do we have any results? I'm going to highlight this screen right here, and we see that expertise, going back to Pau's point about talent, is the clear winner here. We need expertise on board. So let's, thank you very much, dear audience. Let's keep that in mind for our second round. Simon, can I start with you? You know both sides, right? The entrepreneurial side and the investor side. So what would you expect from investors to make your job even easier and better?
So that we've had incredibly supportive shareholders at CityFibre, and I'm really pleased with we're introducing 2 new shareholders that will actually get announced tomorrow, who they are, and I'm really excited about them joining the board. But what was really interesting for me in the latest round of capital raising was the clear sophistication of the investor base. And I think we're now seeing actually really good segmentation of where people want to focus on. People have commented there's a lot of liquidity around. My observation is that when we started, our kind of fundraising, probably in the second quarter of this year or this round of it, we had a really long list of investors, but that got whittled down very quickly to the investors that wanted to do wholesale kind of 500 to €1 billion type of check size, in the UK. That came down really to a handful quite quickly. And we've seen actually the same in other fundraisings across Europe. And I think there might be a lot of capital around at the relatively small kind of, 100 million EV stage. But I think as these businesses scale, actually for the amount of capital that's needed for national infrastructure projects, there's not a long list of investors that are going to back those. I think people are being quite differentiated now. And I think not only in the equity markets, but also particularly in the credit markets. And I'd really echo, kind of Marco's point, and I think the ING experience has for sure been that people are now looking not just at can you deploy capital, because I think we've demonstrated as an industry we can do that, but actually, can you fill up the network? And how much of the network will you fill up is really a lot about what a lot of the discussion is around. And so for us, certainly, we feel promoting and prompting that demand side of the equation and having investors that understand that is really, really key. So I think it's positive as an environment, but I think it's much more differentiated than it was a year ago and certainly the year before that.
And following up on this, what do you see in the future as being the predominant source of financing? Is it going to be equity or is it going to be debt?
Well, it's always going to be a mixture. It's always going to be a mixture of those. I mean, I think that the debt threshold is about 70% of capitalization. So that seems to be where the market is today. I could see it going up a little bit, but probably not by too much. That feels about right. It'll depend on how interest rates develop. We're still in an incredibly low interest rate environment if you look over the course of the last century or so. So still very attractive for debt funding, but I don't think that's going to last if inflation really starts to push through.
Thank you, Simon. Let's go to Marco again, because you mentioned already an expectation from investors and due diligence producers, if you will. Is there anything else that would really help you as an investor to become even faster, to become even better?
I wouldn't say as an investor becoming even faster or better. I would say what would add value, or where we see the strongest relationships developing, is when you have a maximum level of transparency and honesty on both sides. Because what you should think of from a fiber operator perspective, right? You're not just going in there for one round of capital, as Simon elaborated. He has been now through the second or third round of capital raising. So be sure you're scaling up your business. And if you are not really transparent on day one or in year one, probably in year 3, you will need to reapproach debt investors or equity investors asking for additional funds to roll out the network. And at that point in time, you will also need to run through another due diligence exercise. So arguably, if you're lagging behind in your rollout plan or in your penetration ramp-up curve, be honest about it and don't try to hide it away by some KPI engineering. This is where we would say is the most value add in the partnership, because arguably also the investors are there to make business, and then there is an eagerness on both sides to grow the respective fiber operator.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Eve, because you had so many good points on the business models of fiber rollout, and obviously there's not really another side to that. But do you see this development of current fiber business models contributing to enhance the entrepreneurial and investor relationship?
I think yes, but what I would like to add is that there also needs to be a relationship between the entrepreneurs and the investors and the telecom regulators in particular. I think that not enough interaction is happening there, and that a sort of mutual permanent relationship needs to be built. And I think what regulators need to understand is what it takes to finance a new network, the challenger network, because regulators have been very much focused on the incumbents and the dominant companies. But so to Simon's point, what's happening in the UK, I think where the regulator is focused on the offer of Openreach, but the impact on the other operators is really, really important. So that's really an important point where a relationship needs to exist. And I'm sure, Simon, you're working hard on that. And then secondly, I think on the investor side, to be very blunt, I think some people are expecting the market to consolidate very strongly, and that there will be areas and significant areas where there will be only one fiber network. And the investor needs to understand that the job of the regulator is to ensure that there's competition ultimately at the retail level, but that competition at the wholesale level is also very desirable. And therefore, we need to guard against expectations of new monopolies, because regulators will do what they have to do on a statutory basis. That is their mandate, to ensure that there remains vibrant competition going forward. And I think it's important for everybody in the environment to really understand what the job of the regulator is there. And then very important story that we have learned is that, traditional operators have fought back against regulation. Mobile operators have had certain practices in roaming, in wholesale termination rates, etc., that regulators have had to address. So my message is that if you're a fiber operator today, and especially a new one and a challenger, learn from the situations in which regulators have had to intervene against other parties in the past, and try to avert a situation in which regulators will have to intervene against you. And I think voluntary wholesaling, fit for purpose wholesale services, a level of pricing, etc., that is adequate for the market, are all elements that enable you to do basically on a commercial or voluntary basis what the objective of the regulator is. And if that is done correctly, then there is much less necessity or motivation for the regulator to take action against the new operators in the market. Now, there is a concern, is that there's a legal instrument called the Broadband Cost Reduction Directive. And this is an instrument that's not focused on the traditional or the dominant operators, but applies to all the operators. And what we see is that there is a potential that this instrument might be too interventionist with regard to the new and the challenger operators, and that kind of the old school of regulation is being extended to everybody. And I don't think that can be the objective of the regulatory framework, and good interactions between both entrepreneurs and investors and regulators to make sure that we understand that some type of regulation might be appropriate, but other types of regulation are not appropriate if the behavior is what it is something that's really important to understand. And therefore, management teams of operators and investors, I think, need to have this dialogue, but also need, as I said at the beginning, the understanding that if you're going to behave like the traditional operators have behaved in the past, well, then don't be surprised that regulation will kick in, and that regulation will affect the profitability of the investment.
Thank you, Yves. And let's follow up on this, maybe with Marco and Simon, from your investing expertise and investing background. Is that something to bring the regulators on board, no matter on which kind of level, be it municipality or even European? Is that something that you've seen in the past and that has actually helped you?
I mean, certainly in a UK context, Ofcom is really focused on listening to investors. They have roundtables with our shareholders and with other investors in the sector. So I think there's a good open dialogue around that. But I would also observe that, as a regulator, they have obviously spent decades regulating BT, and that is what they are experts on most of the time. So it's very, very important that we do have this dialogue and this open conversation about trying to establish an effective challenger. And my sense is that's echoed around Europe as well.
Thank you. Before we follow up on regulation, because this seems to hit a nerve here, Let me ask Pau. You brought up the talent question, and maybe there's also something related to this one when we look at the investor and entrepreneurial relationship, because we saw clearly in our poll that expertise is a key thing here.
Yeah, well, it's key, and it's very complicated to find that resources, right? And the point is that it's accelerating. So what we are seeing is that we are seeing more projects every quarter. So people calling us, and they all need the same profiles, which means that at the beginning it was feasible, and now it's getting complex. What do we recommend is to think global. So there are some markets that requires their own language, like the French market or the German market. But there are some positions in back office or in network that might survive with non-country resources. So we deeply recommend to think broad and to think outside their own countries in order to find that resources. This is our point there.
Thank you very much. And let's follow up on this with Michael, because that's essentially what you did, right? You started in your own country and then expanded with the experiences from there. Would you agree to this?
I would agree to that. And what is really important here is to understand that the three-level model is becoming more established. So what we see as a result of that are new investors in fiber. They're coming from areas where they have a natural extension to their core business. So utilities, real estate companies, municipalities, and private investors are also coming in. But they don't always have the expertise. Expertise here becomes the bottleneck. I'm seeing big projects being built on time, to spec, to budget, and completely fail. Having spent hundreds and hundreds of millions. And the reason is the commercialization, as you say, Simon. This is what it is all about. We can show that we can build, and congratulations, if you build to spec, to time, and on budget, you have shown that you can spend money. But we're here to make money. That is the huge difference. And the other thing I need to say at this point is that there is an expectation of consolidation in the market. And I would actually disagree with that needs to happen. We saw in South Africa, for example, where we are dominant today, that we have 45% of the market, incumbent 40. The rest, 15%, is shared by 30 small fiber operators. They all build to sell. And mostly they have all failed to even make their money back. And I think this is a situation where you will find many countries, the Me Too's, that don't make it in the hundreds of thousands, that you do need it. You need a scale, you need to be a significant player in the markets that you enter. So again, what do I expect? I expect people to respect what I know. And so if you're in the fiber building space, show me where to build, get the finance, get the project monitored, but let us do the revenue generating part of that. That's proven to be the key to success in all the areas where we worked, in all the countries. So yeah, thank you.
That's an awesome point, obviously, and obviously also an important one. So let's just follow up on this real quick. Commercialization and the talent for it. If you could just name to us a couple of things that you think are absolutely critical in getting this done, because this also refers back to a point that Marco made. You want to be the leader in your respective environment in just 3 years. So the commercial side of things is obviously key. So what do you need for it?
Well, you need a fundamental understanding of how this service provider market works. So we have an open access network, an active open access network. We partner with service providers. You need to broaden that to work actively with that universe of service providers to address many different segments. This is absolutely critical. Do not go for the tier ones to start with. They will screw you over. You will bend over backwards. They'll be taking that pound of flesh, and you will be left high and dry. Go for this second and third tier. Start there. They have the ambition. They have the drive. The tier ones will come, but do not start there. So understanding your market, your segmentation, your service providers, that ecosystem, that is so, so important.
Thank you very much. Awesome. Good point. Yes, Richard, Do you have a couple of points to add to those that we already made about our relationship and entrepreneurs, investors?
Yes, thank you, Tom. Yes, in my mind, both investors and entrepreneurs are looking at the same object, FTTH networks. So we spoke about regulation, for example, but it's a complex business environment. Another point is politics. You know, in many rural areas where we are, in many countries, you have public money, which is mixed with private money on a way or another way, and that's an explosive mix. And so, you must be aware of that situation because it will remain for a long time. We are speaking not on one-shot business, we are shot on long-range business. And the second point is, I don't know if I can display the presentation, but is that FTTH network, which is a common point between entrepreneur and, I don't know if it is, no, I don't think it's working. It's a complex machine. Okay.
There we go.
Yes, I see. It's a complex machine, and I want to stress on this complex part, and I just take 1 or 2 minutes to show you, to display you. And also it's an essential infrastructure. What I mean that we know, for example, in France, we have the case, in several parts, you have fiber optics, you don't have mobile there. And so you have a very high rate penetration. So first we are dealing with big figures. Typically in medium dense area, 100,000 homes projects, 100 million capex. It could be 200-300 million capex. We are not in town, we are in large investment, and the lines are long, and we are connecting each home. As for electricity or telephone, there are several countries where there are software. They say you can connect 50%, for example, in Italy, or in somewhere it's free. But by the way, the purpose is to connect everyone, and you have to make business with that. And to make some money. I just want to show you a part of the network. And it's like an iceberg. You know, when you are speaking regarding FTTH, you are only looking at the top, a small part. It's a very complex machine. And when you put money, you put hundreds of millions euros in the ground, but you don't see anything. And if you are not looking carefully, you lose money. For investors that I'm saying. So I don't know if you can display just, please, Mr. the producer. Josh, could you, okay, a virtual tour, yes. Street cabinet, it's 400 homes connected. You see, you have optical cables and jumpers, and you see, you can open it, okay, and you have to connect everything. So, for example, one of the risks, if you are not careful when building the network, if we are not providing some measurement like it, then the result will be a mess. And we know, according to our experience, several networks, when there is a real mess, now in French, they say a word, they say spaghetti noodles. So it does mean that if it is not well done, you'll get problems. And the investors, like many investors, they don't know that. You know, they think they are buying a house or a building or a road. No, it's not that. It's a complex machine. And so you have to check many things. For example, here you see example, and you see the cables. Here, the cabinet. Here in a vault. And there are many points to be checked, not only the business plan. What I mean is the network is not only a cash machine made with Excel. It's also made with people, as we say, and with networks which are reliable and well designed. That was my point.
Right. Thank you very much. We also add a technical challenge to what we already heard. Hillary, I understand it's going to be tough to come up with yet another point, but let me pass it on to you anyway.
Yeah, no, we've covered a lot here, and I've spent a lot of my life focused on the commercialization piece. I actually was running our business in Australia, New Zealand when we got NBN and Chorus started, and it's interesting to observe all the different models that have worked. But I'm going to raise a different issue, which is operations. I think typically people really underestimate, and particularly like there are these waves of investment over the years with utilities that want to become telcos, and they believe they have fiber and therefore they can do everything. And what they usually run into is figuring out pretty fast that building a network is pretty easy actually compared to running it. So I think the operational piece is the other piece that investors and entrepreneurs expect from each other support on. And there are far more qualified people here to talk about that. But typically we see that operations is underestimated, and in a wholesale network, it's a little more complicated than you expect it to be. And if you're rolling fiber to the home, working out all the particulars of how, I remember when we first did some fiber to the home work, we built a lab and we just did endless testing of different models for how you're going to deploy in a home. And it sounds uninteresting. It's actually really critical to your business case and critical to retention of customers over time, because they don't want to be changing that equipment out on a regular basis. And then operational and operating in a wholesale environment, one of the things that I worked on when I was part of our fixed networks unit was our virtualization strategy. And the reason that's really important in a modern fiber network is being able to, again, if you can virtualize components of the network management in particular, it gives you a lot of flexibility for a long-term network. Because the problem is you have software that's going to change regularly, and you have hardware that's going to stay there for a very long time. So I guess that's the only thing I would add. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So let me try to summarize what we've heard. There are a couple of challenges. They come from the technology side, they come from the people side, certainly from the expertise side. But I think everybody on this panel would agree on the fact that we are looking at the commercial aspect, which is probably the most critical one. Also in relationship with regulation. So let's focus on this just a little bit more. Marco, when we talk about commercial due diligence, would you say as an investor that this commercial due diligence gives you a good insight into the capability of an entrepreneur to really succeed in the commercialization? I hate this word, by the way. Okay, I'm trying to pronounce it better.
No, I think it comes down to what Richard said, right? A business is not only made in Excel, and the commercial due diligence is probably just commenting on the Excel file. So, and I think what I mentioned earlier, that management or getting to know management and forming a view of it is something that for investors is very important. Arguably, looking at the commercial due diligence report or also at the business plan already provides you with some insights. I was referring earlier today, you want to grow from 0 to hero, essentially become the next national champion. I think if you look at a couple of business plans in the same jurisdiction and everyone wants to do that, that already provides you some insight or indication on the prudency in terms of planning. That's what I would say. That said, commercial due diligence remains certainly a critical part, right? So you want to have peer benchmarks, things like that, but it is not the only or the most important thing in terms of an debt investment decision.
All right. So, Michael, what kind of questions would you ask, assuming that you would be an investor, what questions would you ask the management team in order to assess their commercial capabilities? That's a tough one. Sorry about that.
No, it is a tough one because it is an ecosystem. The service providers are looking for a large universe. And how do you present a large enough universe for the service providers to be interested? How do you lower the barriers to entry to the service providers? How do you make it attractive to your service provider partners? And the other thing we found, be interested in your comments, Simon, but UK is the only really market where we are active, where the consumer still doesn't get the benefit of fiber. Every other market, they get it. You say fiber and yeah, I'll have one of those. UK, no. They want it's a service. I think they've been indoctrinated by the incumbents for too long. But the issue here is that how do you prime a market together with the service provider? So we have actually entered. So we are going to sell service with a connection to start with, but then extract ourselves as a pure wholesaler. But to stimulate the market early on, so early take up. And we have a number of levers, but the main lever that we have is how we work with the service provider community and make their life as easy as possible. I think that's the key point here.
Simon, would you like to comment on that one?
I think the UK is a different market. I think that the ISPs in the market, so roughly 5 ISPs account for 90% of the end customer connections in the UK. They've all been using the word fibre in their advertising for the last 5 to 10 years on connecting FTTC. So the word fibre is just polluted. We arrive in the street, I can't tell you, I would imagine that almost 50% of homes where we say we're digging fibre in your street, sorry, we're going to make a mess. And they say, well, I don't know why you're doing that because I've already got fibre. Of course they don't. So there's a problem there, and it's a fundamental problem, and I think not one that we can easily address because it's so ingrained just by using different language. I think we're going to have to use different marketing approaches, and it does require the ISPs, the incumbent ISPs, like Sky, like TalkTalk, some of the players like Vodafone. You know, they're going to have to make a differentiation, and it's not going to be on the word; it's going to be on the service and the capability.
Right, let me ask one final open question to anybody with respect to the commercial side of things. Anybody want to contribute an idea to this, especially when we look at this investor and entrepreneur relationship?
Yeah, maybe what if I can say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe what I would emphasize and is how the commercial and marketing organization is built. And for us, it's very important that they are what we call data-driven commercial organizations. And that's something that has to do with, obviously with the systems that are prepared for that, but also on how the departments are organized. And that applies to both to the retail and to wholesale, right? We have some clients with more than 200 ISP service codes connected, and the only way to manage, to steer them and to push them is to have a proper data management of the operations. And similar happens to retail.
Thank you for bringing that point up. Yes, Yves.
Okay.
Yeah, just to say that in the guide to fiber business models that has recently been produced by the FTTH Council Europe, we describe the model where basically the operator goes out to a municipality and requests from the population through meetings, through mailings, through leaflets, etc., whether they would be interested to commit to signing up for 24 months to a fiber connection. And they make very clear that they will only build that fiber network in case, say, 30–40% of the population agrees to taking up that commitment upfront at the retail level. And then the flip side of that, in a sense, is another type of model which City Fibre in the UK has initially used, is to sign up a significant ISP or a significant service provider upfront that enters into a commitment to take up a significant proportion of the line. So these are what we called in the document risk reduction measures or some term to that effect. So that's really part of the commercialization strategies as well, both at the retail and at the wholesale level.
Thank you. Richard, you want to add to this?
Yes, I had something to add, that commercialization success depends also on the territory where is put, it's set the FTTH network. If you are operating something in town or in very dense areas, then you have the competition with coax, competition with 4G, with 5G. And so, of course, your penetration rate will less that in some different areas where it's very expensive to build something, when you are the only one, so the competition is better for the fiber operator. And so you can achieve such a success when you are designing your project at the beginning. You can ensure the financing from public authorities, if you can ensuring the easiness of the competition, for example, with a wholesale access, then you get business. Yet that's the question. It's investors and entrepreneurs. And at the last, I can say something. When you have, for example, toll highways, you know, the highways, the most profitable highways for an entrepreneur, for an investor, are when there is no traffic. Because when there is no traffic, you have a grant. So you can fit your expense according to it. So it's the same. So what I can say for investors, you have to look at rural area, and in my opinion, is where there is a great demand. Not only in Europe, for example, we are working in Canada. You know, in Canada, in far of the Canada, where you have very poor, very scarce population, and you have business there, and they are fully private companies. So please look at the territory for the fight and the battle and the investment.
Yeah, I think that's also from Sun Tzu, right? The Art of War. You have to look at the territory that you fight on. Kind of interesting that this applies also here. Let's before we go to the final round, we have neglected so far the talent issue, which has been brought up, and the expertise issue. And just briefly, an open question into the round. Obviously, those companies that will win the war for talent, to go back to this old Sun Tzu metaphor, have a huge advantage, because in the long term, this is going to be the key bottleneck. Any thoughts from the panel on this? How do you attract talent? How do you become an important employer, an important player in this when you just think about talent? Okay, it's a tough one. I understand.
I mean,
Michael, go ahead. Sorry.
Just say that we fundamentally believe in fiber networks to be a public good. And this is a controversial statement, of course. But what I mean with that is that we need to ensure that the communities benefit from the work that we do. And we haven't touched on this yet, but it's really important, additional revenue sources. This is why EQT paid twice the normal price for Inexio, for example. They know from the experience in Sweden how you add these extra revenues and get massive profits. So, but the point here is that because doing something more than just putting fiber in the ground and selling connections, we believe in something more. We bring value to the communities. That itself have made us an attractive employer, because people want to believe there's something more to the fiber industry than just putting fiber in the ground and selling connections. We bring value to the communities where we work. So that has been a key thing for us to attract talent.
Thank you for bringing that point up. Simon.
Yeah, look, we've been adding 100 people a month during lockdown in the UK into our business. So I would say that we have been able to attract talent, you know, for exactly the reasons that I think Michael's outlined. You know, we are perceived as being a business which is doing something that's really good and valuable to society in the UK. And because of that, people want to work in, you know, what is a high growth and exciting environment with the latest technology, where they're building a legacy for the next 50 to 100 years. So I would say it's a little bit like capital. Good businesses attract good talent and can attract good capital at the right price. You've got to have the right business model. The key to it, though, because what we're doing, I don't think is necessarily complicated, right? We dig up a street, we lay a duct in it, we put fiber in it, we put some optical components at each end. That is not complex. It's complicated, but it's not complex. We've got a business with 2,000 people in it. That's complex. And it's the people that create the complexity. And creating that environment and that alignment and that sense of purpose as to what we're doing is really, for us, I think, the key to success. And I'm thrilled with where we are on that journey. And I think that we'll continue to attract some of the best talent in the UK, because what we're doing is building something for everyone in the country, for the success of the country, for the future. So I don't see that myself as a bottleneck. I think we're attracting some amazing people, and we're very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah.
Good statement. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if I may add, so normally the FTTH startups are quite attractive itself. You have a nice story to tell. As Simon said, right? You give something to the society. So we don't see an issue there. And you have also some levers, right? You might have stock options. You might have a lot of different things. So the problem is more again the resources, right? You have had a first wave of talent that you could take out of the consolidation of the first tier operators. So there you have some pool to fish, to find proper people. The issue comes on the second wave. So once this has finalized, then the issue is what do you do? And the problem of telecom is that it's quite endogamic. So normally on the positions you ask that the people have telco experience, and there is where you start to struggle on certain positions because there are no more people with telco experience. So you have to start to think what industries around you might provide you with additional resources. But itself, the startup FTTH has what we found is has a very nice story to tell.
Right. Any more points on the war for talent or attracting talents?
Can I ask a question of I would have thought actually IT is the tougher. So again, when we talk about operations, IT is a really important part of it. I would think that's the toughest place to find resources at the moment is IT with the kind of knowledge that can build the right operating environment for you and the right billing environment and all that. Is that true or no?
Yeah, I think for us, that's definitely one of the areas where, getting someone who's fluent in networks, customer service, and the latest technology platforms, that is a kind of tight spot. But in reality, you don't need, hundreds of those people.
Yes.
So, we've got, I think, a small but very talented group doing that today. But I would agree that is a differentiator for us in the long run. We have to be the lowest cost provider and with the best service. That's the only way we're going to win against the incumbent, those two components, and the best service, that whole technology part of it is absolutely key. Yep,
best customer effort score.
Yeah, and I would echo that. Someone has said, the business we're in is contracts and software. The rest we can find civil supervisors and that sort of thing is not very difficult, but is exactly that. The commercial, these are huge contracts of hundreds of millions. They have to be very, very precise. So contracts and software, that's what we're all about.
Yeah, it's super important. I would have thought also you're competing with web scalers for that IT talent right now. And web scalers are going crazy, sucking up every piece of talent that exists.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So not everything has been solved. But let's look at the questions from the audience. There are not very many, and actually I just saw one. So that goes back to the commercialization side of things. And it comes from Belgium, from a colleague named Steven. And he asks, in Belgium, we're faced with a big share of coax. What's the impact on commerce? I hate this word. Did I say that before? Commercialization of fiber. What about the impact in more rural areas? So the competition, the good old competition between coax and fiber. Is there anybody who wants to comment on this one?
Maybe I can say something that first, we have to rely on technical basis. And also, for example, as you know, several large companies in the world have moved from coax to fiber optics. One example is Altis. Why? Because at the end of the day, fiber networks, they are symmetrical. I mean, you have download, downspeed, upstream, and the same speed, and also a very short time of latency. It's not possible with coaxial because the architecture of the network is a tree and branch architecture. What I mean, is I can see my hand. You have 5 digits, but 1 trunk. So if you are going down, you can display, for example, TV. But if you want to put some video conferencing, as we are doing, so you need symmetric. And then here you have the bottleneck. that's my demonstration. So at the end of the day, or maybe in 10, there will be some problem. So first, for example, in a building, and we know many buildings, when you have several multi-dwelling units, but then there is traffic jam. That's the story. And then you can experience it. That's a customer experience. So the issue is one, but of course, when there is coax, the coax does exist, and the fiber optics doesn't exist. So it's a competition, and you have to take that in consideration when you are setting your business plan.
So it's a technological superiority. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, at least in our experience, you have two types of marketing approaches, right? On one side, when you have greenfield, and the other side is when you don't have greenfield. If you have greenfield, that's very easy. I mean, basically, you supply with water to somebody that doesn't have water, right? Mm-hmm. So deployment there's no big marketing point there. The point is when you don't have greenfield, and there the market is polluted from a communication point of view. Nobody understands what means having your own network. Nobody understands what means having your own fiber, because operators, first-tier operators, has polluted from a communication perspective the market. Mm-hmm. There are experiences that you have one edge to win, which is being local. The big ones operate on volumes. The smaller ones have to operate at municipality level, and there is where you have an edge. And there is where your commercial, at least over what we have seen, is where the commercial teams that have won market share in non-greenfield operations have understood.
Thank you. Yes, Mikael.
If we can add to that, we have a number of areas we can show quantitatively how this has happened. When fiber comes in, we would eradicate DSL within 18 to 24 months, gone. But capable cable actually is much stickier. It would take 10 years to really bend that. From day one, we would go head to head with a capable cable system, and we would get roughly 50-50, and we were head to head. But over time, the fiber would win. And what's happening, of course, is the whole coax industry is fighting retreat. They are building fiber like mad in the background, trying to persuade their investors that coax is really up to the job. It isn't. They know that, but not fundamentally for delivery purposes, but for OpEx, is hugely costly to operate. And that's simple as that. Mm-hmm. So the coax industry is shifting to fiber. They just want to retain as much market share as possible whilst they're doing that. I mean, that's our fundamental strategy, yeah.
You can probably add a power and green component to that over time as well. But I fully agree with you, Mikael. We're seeing it's just there's a fundamental technology difference. And we have a lot of customers that are cable customers that are moving to fiber as well.
So there's competition between capable cable and fiber.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So we as investors need to keep that in mind also, because the more and more areas are coming around where you have this kind of competition. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. That was basically the only question that we had from the audience. Thank you for your answer to it. And I think it's time already for our final round. That's pretty incredible. So any thoughts? Our final rounds is from this discussion, from what we've learned. What are our thoughts for the future? What are the 1 or 2 points that we need to focus on as a group of investors and entrepreneurs? Mm-hmm. And let's open up this final round with a short statement. Richard, from you, what do you think? What are your key learnings now for the future? What will you focus on for the next steps?
So the next step, I have also a little one slide, but if I can say, the issue the following. You said you need expertise, and so you need an expertise in regard of assessing the projects, and as I said, you have the commercialization, but also you have the technical, because you are investing in a machine, in a network, and you are convinced, and you will convince others that it will deliver the service for a long time. I mean, 20 years, because as we discussed previously, for example, the competition between coax and fiber, it will stay for maybe 10 years. So you need some expertise, and one I can say is that you need an independence of judgment at the first point, a proven competence, and delivering several points that can help the investor and the entrepreneur to rely on the same basis of the project. Because the investor will put money or will lend money, but by the way, the entrepreneur will have a drive, a business drive, but everybody is assuming that the machine is working. And what I just want to stress is that in regarding the fiber networks, we have to check many points in order that people can rely on their business plan.
All right, thank you very much.
By customers. That's the point. Thank you.
Right. Yves, looking forward, what are your key points?
Yeah, I think that the investors and entrepreneurs need a good and common understanding of what is regulated by telecom regulators and why it is regulated, and what could potentially become regulated in the future, and again, why. So what's the state of the market that triggers regulation, and what's the type of behavior that triggers regulation? And basically the same applies to competition law, of course. So companies that can show a good track record of contributing to competition by wholesaling, by having good behavior towards their retail customers, are less likely to attract regulation. So providing good fit-for-purpose wholesale that satisfies the access seekers means that the access seekers don't have to go and complain to the regulator. This means that there's probably a good outcome for the consumer at the retail level, and therefore it's much less likely that regulation will kick in. So my story is basically learn from the past of telecom history, where the large incumbent telecom companies have had to be regulated in response to a particular type of behavior, and try to structure the market in a way that does not trigger that type of regulation. So good mutual understanding of the goals of the investors from the part of the regulators, and good understanding on the part of the investors and the entrepreneurs of what triggers regulation.
All right, thank you very much. Looking forward, Paul, anything from your side that you want to stress?
Two messages. First is that independent expert marketplace provides you with the required flexibility, which is basically what we provide. And second, build data-driven marketing and sales organizations to be able to work at very granular at municipality level.
Thank you very much. Hillary, I mean, you are the strategy department here, so we're kind of looking forward to what you have to say about the future.
So about the future, I'm actually surprised that nobody asked about 5G as a competition as well. So for both investors and for builders, there are a lot of different kinds of access types. Most people have multiple access types to their home today for internet. You have a million ways you get it. In Finland, for example, where mobile took off really early, most people use 4G in their homes for the things that most of you on the call would be using copper or fiber for. So don't underestimate technology. Fiber is superior to everything else. It's physics, okay? So we need to continue to help people understand what they can get out of it. Don't forget your vendor partners. Nokia is outside of China. We're the #1 player in this space. We build more fiber networks than anyone, and we're very happy. We have our Bell Labs colleagues have built a lot of models to help understand an access environment and help you make those tough decisions, because every access environment in every country and city and town is different. And we are here to help. We've created, partly in my team, a group of people that focus on neutral hosts, because actually there's a massive shift in the market because of capital, because of debt-laden telcos and different markets. So you're seeing tower companies that will maybe enter the fiber space and so on, right? So we have a group of people that are focused on that space and can help as well as you come together. So it's not just about an entrepreneur and an investor. There's an ecosystem around that. And the last thing is keep an eye on the semiconductor market, because I know that's been challenging some things. and don't underestimate where it may hit you, and be prepared for that. That's it. That was a lot. Sorry.
Can I follow up on this one? Because being prepared for the semiconductor market, what does it mean exactly? Are you looking at technological progress there, or?
No, there's a short term, just like there's a talent challenge. You're going to find a challenge in some cases around semiconductors, particularly for home devices. Even things like so it's affecting the entire world. It's affecting cars. It's affecting networks. It's affecting home devices everywhere you go. Just keep an eye on it. Don't underestimate it, and make sure you lobby your governments to give it to you for your networks.
All right, thank you very much for this one, Marco. Let's continue with you and your points for the future, expectations for the investor-entrepreneur relationship.
I wouldn't say expectations, but saying more avoiding disappointments and keeping the email traffic low. So in order to make communication more efficient. So as an entrepreneur, certainly you want to grow your network, and for that you require equity as well as debt. So I would ask you to make up your mind before approaching a debt investor. What is really important, right? There are more elements attached to getting a loan than just the volume or the amount and the price. So if you have made up your mind on debt things, there are always ways to structure from a debt perspective around certain elements. So, but if you have made up your mind on the most important points, it's quite efficient to communicate to banks or investors and find common ground to move forward and provide financing towards your venture.
Thank you, and I hope this discussion will actually help some people to focus. Mikkel, let's continue with you, and maybe if I may ask you to follow up on Hillary's point on 5G, because you had such good data on coax. Maybe you also have something comparable for 5G.
Well, on this particular one, I once went back over 30 years looking at the main access technology, looking at satellite and terrestrial radio versus fiber and copper. And it turned out that over time, about 10% of the market uses terrestrial radio, i.e. 4G, 5G, as a main access technology. That seems to be standard. Over some periods of time, it varies, mainly because of pricing and overcapacity. You can have short-term glitches in that, but 10%-ish, that's the main access methodology. So we see 5G as very much a complementary technology to fiber on the whole. We believe that every household will have at least one fiber, and that's a controversial statement in itself. We have cases in Sweden where houses have 3 independent fibers, for example, already, and they're coming into every single house. And services will be over the top. There will be no vertically integrated operators anymore. They are dying out. We know that. Everyone knows that. But just like gravity, if you're big enough, you can resist a little bit longer. So, but I wanted to say that slightly controversial again, it's not our problem, and I think what we heard today, it's not financing per se, but when we look at great outcomes, it's cooperation at the core, but governance structures. That's where we're spending a lot of time now, so really designing in appropriate governance structures in all the projects that we're working. We're finding that in the contracts, you overlooked that. You took that, we got a steering committee, they'll sort things out. But no, if you spend a lot of time actually understanding what you want together and you create the appropriate governance structure, that really, really helps to create those great outcomes that we all want. So that will be my biggest contribution here. I think about what you want together, create that governance structure to ensure that you get those outcomes that you were all hoping for. Otherwise, people around the same table will be hoping for different things. Even though you think we want the same thing, actually we don't until we've spoken about, until we codify that. So
great point. Thank you very much. Let me pass the baton to Simon.
Yeah, look, for us, I think our view is in the long run, what matters most is that we offer the best service at the lowest price. And that's what the winning proposition has to be for the insurgent challenger in any market. And for us to achieve that, I believe that we have to have scale. And back to Michael's point, we think that we have to achieve scale organically. Relying on inorganic consolidation is not going to lead necessarily to a path of success. So I think we believe that we have to, at least achieve our 8 million footprint to get there. That's 30% of the UK, which drives to that unit economic level versus the incumbent. And I guess the final point is, the UK, at least 80% of households are still connected to BT. And so the regulator's job isn't done. They put a framework in place that's allowed investment, but ultimately what matters is where you get to in the end game. And so how you prosecute the rules of the game and how you manage that environment so that long run challenges can be successful and you can create competition at the wholesale layer, that really is the outcome that, in the UK context at least, I think the market is looking for. That job is not over from a regulatory perspective.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this panel discussion, and I cannot express how much I want to thank you for this, both on a personal level, because this is a great group. Congrats for that and applause for that. And also on the content level, because there were many, many really, really interesting things represented here. So again, thank you very, very much. And of course, ladies and gentlemen on screen, our listeners, thank you very, very much for being here. This session will be repeated and will be available as a video download. I guess in 2 hours from now, it's going to be made available, so you can share it with many people from who you think this will be interesting for. And yeah, that's it. I hope you spent an informative and valuable time here. We're looking forward to speaking to you soon, maybe even in person. And an excellent opportunity for this is simply to become a member of our FTTH Investors Committee. And we kindly invite you to participate in this. So let me wish you a great and productive day. Cheers. Bye-bye.